Hello, and welcome to another episode of Perspectives from the Informed Perspective. We're Penny and Jenny, and if this is your first time tuning in, thank you for joining us. This is the podcast where we explore what it means to build thoughtful, grounded communities shaped by our local lives, but enriched by ideas and experiences from around the world. For us, meaningful change starts with listening, really listening, especially to experiences that challenge or expand our own. Today, we're talking about ageism. Why does this conversation matter to us? Well, at the Informed Perspective, we care a lot about community. And one thing we've noticed is that younger and older generations don't always get to spend so much time together. Families move away from grandparents, kids don't always get chances to meet older adults, and those connections just don't happen as much as they should, perhaps. Jenny's often telling me how much she loves spending time with wise elders, and we often reflect on how we would benefit from mentoring from older professionals. We've also been thinking a lot about our tweens too, and how they could benefit from having older teens or adults to learn from. At the same time, we notice our tweens sometimes get frustrated being treated like little kids when honestly they feel anything but. At the end of the day, isn't every age group worthy of respect? And that's exactly why we wanted to host this episode, to dig into these ideas, hear from people who really know the field, and think about how we can all create stronger, more connected communities. So let's start with the question, what is ageism? Well, one of the first things we notice about someone when we meet them is their age. Ageism is the stereotypes we hold, the prejudices we feel, and the ways we all act based on someone's age. The term was coined in 1969 by a psychiatrist, Robert Butler. He saw older patients being dismissed or overlooked simply because of their age and realized society needed a word to describe this kind of normalized prejudice. Ageism isn't just about older people. It's about how we think about age, how we feel about aging, and how those beliefs shape the way we treat ourselves and others. It exists everywhere, in institutions, in workplaces, in everyday interactions, and even in the stories we tell ourselves about growing older. It's not a small issue. Globally, 1 in 2 people hold ageist attitudes towards older adults. But ageism doesn't just affect the older generations, as we've said. In Europe, large surveys such as the European Social Survey indicate that younger adults often report higher levels of perceived age discrimination than older age groups, highlighting that ageist attitudes affect people at every stage of life. This is reinforced by a 2024 study in the United States, which found that millennials and Gen Z reported the highest levels of discrimination based on their generational cohort, often being viewed as less capable, more opinionated, or more selfish. They also reported higher levels of anxiety about aging and their own place in society. We know that middle-aged adults are affected too, frequently overlooked professionally or subtly written off as less adaptable or innovative. Ageism touches all of us at every stage of life. It's often invisible. In its most obvious form, it shows up in jokes about wrinkles, assumptions about competence, or comments about someone being too young or too old. But more quietly, it starts much earlier, in the way we talk about getting older as something to fear, in the way youth is framed as the peak of relevance, beauty, and worth. Over time, this builds a culture that treats aging as decline rather than growth. And nowhere is this tension clearer than in the workplace. The job market increasingly rewards visibility and speed, sometimes over experience and depth, reinforcing generational divides instead of bridging them. Yet, older generations remain the backbone of families and communities. They are caregivers, storytellers, and quiet anchors, and they hold history, wisdom, and perspectives that can't be looked up on the internet, and their presence matters. What are the solutions to ageism? Perhaps it starts with noticing our own assumptions and gently challenging the stereotypes we might not even realize we hold. And so that's why we've invited our panel today. What can we learn from Carol's experience helping people get active later in life? And how does Kerry's work connecting generations actually change the way communities interact? We're asking what happens when we overlook the contributions of older generations? Who really bears the cost? And what could life look like if aging were embraced, not as an ending, but as a natural evolution? And with that in mind, I'd like to share a few quotes to make us reflect a little deeper. Attributed to Ashton Applewhite, an ageism activist. Ageism is the last socially acceptable prejudice and the most invisible. As Ocean Vuong writes in The Emperor of Gladness, how is it that we have become so certain that the sight of years, the summation of decades, should inflict such violence on the viewer, including family, that we have built entire fortresses to keep such bodies out of sight? And Mokonona, P for pessimism, a collection of funny yet profound aphorisms. Being older deceives us into thinking that we are experts at being the ages we used to be. And Margaret Gullett, in her book Aged by Culture, we are aged more by culture than by chromosomes. And on that note, without further ado, Jenny, please introduce our guests for today.
Thank you, Penny. And they say that age is just a number, but there's often assumptions made and issues faced at different ages. And today's guests will give us insight into their advocacy that they're doing for different age groups. So first up is Carol Bates, who's 59 and only started playing football at 48. She founded the Crawley Old Girls and the first group in the country for women of the missed generation who never got the chance to play when they were younger. Working with the FA, Carol helped grow women's recreational football for all ages, including through the UEFA Women's Euro 2022 Legacy Programme. 10 years later, she founded Old Girls Play Too, a movement to inspire, educate and empower women 40 plus to change their lives through recreational sport. Carol knows firsthand how transformative recreational sport can be for health, confidence and social connection. She's passionate about showing women over 40 that you don't have to be sporty to play. There's a place for everyone, no matter age, fitness, ability, size, shape, or knowledge of the game. Her story is a powerful reminder that age doesn't define opportunity and that getting active later in life can bring joy, confidence, and community. And Kerry Hardey is an experienced physiotherapist with over 20 years' practice in community aged care. She has witnessed the impacts of social isolation, loneliness, and ageism in older adults, shaping her strong commitment to supporting inclusive, connected communities. Kerry is completing a Master of Ageing and Health and is a board member of the Australian Institute for Intergenerational Practice. She has also undertaken a certificate-free in early childhood education and care, reflecting her commitment to evidence-informed cross-sector approaches to well-being across the lifespan. Kerry co-founded the Intergenerational Project to foster meaningful cross-generational connections and bring a value-driven approach grounded in social inclusion, advocacy, and relationship-centered practice. Outside of her professional roles, she enjoys spending time with her young family and exploring the outdoors through beach walks, hiking, mountain biking, and camping. So Penny, let's get this conversation started.
Amazing. So I'd like to start with Carol this morning. Thank you for joining us. Carol, you founded the Crawley Old Girls to give women of the missed generation a chance to play football, but you yourself only started at 48 playing football, which is amazing. What was it like starting something completely new, and how did it grow into a wider movement?
First of all, thank you for inviting me on. It's a pleasure to be here. Since I was maybe 7 or 8, I've always loved football. I used to go with my dad and watch him every weekend, and various sort of actions throughout the years up to my 30s and 40s. I did various jobs in football, volunteering jobs in football, and just really loved the game. And when it came to age 48, I was chair of our local professional football club's supporters association. And there was the foundation were delivering a session to try and get more girls into playing football. So they had a session which was for girls age 14 plus. And I just got to a stage and I thought, if I don't do something soon, I'm never going to do it. And I just love football anyway. So it was on Twitter at the time. So I had a conversation with the foundation over Twitter saying, can I come and join these sessions? And the maximum age group, the maximum age was 25. So I was a little bit too old for that, but it just set something in me. And I just thought, well, maybe if I set something up myself with you, can we get some older women just to teach us as under sevens, basically, as people, as women that have never played football before, just treat us as under sevens. And they got some funding from the Football League Trust, as it was then. And we set up 10 sessions, which I was so excited about. And I knew that I had so many friends my age who loved football and never got the chance to play, because due to the ban by the FA for 50 years, girls were never allowed to play football at school, which might sound a bit strange now when you when you listen to it, because there's so many opportunities now for girls to play football, which is absolutely amazing, and it's going to be normal. But then we couldn't play football, so we started the first session off and we had 10 women, and it was absolutely unbelievable. We just laughed, we ran about. Most of us hadn't been active since we were teenagers, and we just had such fun. Couldn't walk for the next few days, but we were so excited to get back the following week, and it just went from there, really. And it grew and grew. We got more women coming in to play for the first time, and as we were kind of the first group to do it, we worked a lot with the FA to promote older women coming into football for the first time. And just the joy that it brought to so many women. And now 11 years later, we run 6 sessions a week, and I've just seen so many inspirational women, so many stories of how confidence has been built, physical, mental well-being, health has just increased so much, and just the benefits of being active in the first place without being too competitive. It's incredible for a woman of my age to not be. The last thing I did was a step class when I was 19, I think it was, which was quite a long time ago. So not being active in all that time, and then at age 48 to start playing football, just the joy it brought. And I just thought, if I can feel that joy, and I haven't been active for that many years, then there must be so many women in this country that would actually love to come and do a recreational sport, whether it be football or whatever. So that was it ended up being a moral purpose in the end, to just get as many women playing football as possible.
Yeah, and it wasn't necessarily then just football per se. It was kind of a gap, a recreational gap that hadn't sort of been, women potentially were wanting it, but didn't know how to gain access to that. What are the biggest barriers that women over 40 face then?
Well, I think when you look at it, women, when they get into their 40s, they're so busy with life, looking after parents, looking after children, not having much time for themselves. And also, some women don't think they belong in sport because they're not fit, they don't know anything out, they don't have any knowledge of the sport, they don't think they're the right shape, they don't think they're the right size. And actually, it doesn't matter what shape, size, level of fitness you are, the ability, there is a space for you in sport.
Yeah. And do you see that as a challenge then also against these assumptions that people when they get older can or shouldn't be able to do sport?
Absolutely. I mean, when you talk about sport and you watch sport on the television, many women will probably look at that and think, oh God, I can't do that. You have to be elite, you have to be professional. And that's not the case. You have to, I think it's difficult as well because you have menopause, women going through menopause, perimenopause, and mental well-being. Just actually coming out on your own to join a new club or a new group is sometimes a bit terrifying. So the groups themselves have to make sure that you buddy up women with other women, and just make sure that it's very, very welcoming, and it's not, in my eyes, competitive. I like to make sure that everyone enjoys it, has fun, and comes back the next week. So there is a place for competitive recreational sport for older women, but my purpose is to get women active in the first place and get participating.
And what I love about, your story, Carol, is there's often this assumption that you can rediscover yourself, or people do typically kind of rediscover new interests or seek out new interests at retirement, when they have, you touched on it. And I think it's really important. We did a podcast on midlife, and it's, it is a busy time of life. your 40s and 50s, but things are changing, and there is this kind of focus that can come back on yourself, and it's being encouraged to find those opportunities where, even though you might not feel like it because of changes, biologically, physically, mentally, but there are these opportunities to do it, and there's no pressure, which you touched on as well, around the competition. It's the fun element, and it's the coming together of community. And I do think, I'm making an assumption, but a lot of people just think, oh, I haven't got the time, and stop listening to what they really want, or giving it a go at what they trying to discover what they might want. They don't know until they try it. And I think it's just really great to hear, from your late 40s and into now, it doesn't have to wait until your life has completely shrunk at retirement or older age. You can still revitalize your life at this midlife intersection.
Yeah, I think I can actually say that it's changed my life, getting active at a later age. And I've seen so many other women who've changed their lives as well. And I think we underestimate what we can actually do as women as we get older, because I remember when I was in my 20s, I couldn't run down the road without being out of puff. No 100-yard dash, I couldn't do that. Now I can run around a football pitch. And I've actually been building up my fitness over 10, 11 years without realising it, but just doing that by having fun, getting active with a football. So I think education-wise is just to get women made aware that they do belong in that space, and there's just so much fun to have, and you can actually change your life, because your mental well-being, your physical well-being, you're reducing your stress, you're reducing diseases, you're helping to stop that just by being active, and also you're reducing social isolation as well, because a lot of women as they get older feel a bit isolated. And then I've met so many women through football now. Some of us all go on holiday together every year, and you just find new people who are your people, if you like. And, your life does change, and it just brings rich rewards.
And sport brings you together, doesn't it? It's a sort of not a pretense, but it gives you that vehicle through which you can come together and have that purpose. But out of that, then there are other facets to
it. There's a lot of this is just a quick comment, because I just did have one more question. Actually, I'll ask that first. Sorry. You started your experience about, ultimately you challenged that opening of girls football, to the 14, and that had that cap of 25. Out of interest, what age range do you have in Crawley Old Girls, or have you seen over the years?
So we started off, most of us, I think, were in our 40s when we first started. We have some incredible women in their 70s, 60s, running around playing football. And actually, what we need to do, as I said before, is educate women that they do belong in that space, because Sport England did an Active Lives data survey in 23-24, and only 2.7% of women aged 55 to 64 engage in team sports. That's really, really low. And I think we need to educate women that they can actually come into recreational sport and change their lives.
But also getting the support, I guess, as well, that we're getting the education, how we support that sporting activity through nutrition, through lifestyle habits as well, that we might also not have necessarily done previously if we haven't done sport. Are you getting enough protein? Are you having the rest days? What happens when you have an injury? That kind of thing.
Yeah, it's, as well as playing football, I started, one of our coaches is a PT instructor, and so we started a gym session for older women, just women on their own, a very small session. And he's now, I just helped him start it, but I absolutely always wanted to go to the gym, never got the opportunity, because I don't want to walk in a gym full of men, because I didn't know what I was doing for a start. But having these little groups where it's just women only, and now he's running like 5 sessions a week for so many women, older women, that want to go to the gym. And that actually makes you feel like you want to change your eating habits, and you want to be healthy, and you want to do all these things to make yourself feel better, because you know that it's doing you good.
So I'm fascinated with this, sorry, and Carol, but as you look around you now in the local areas you're in or across England, what Are there, you mentioned about the insight and the statistic into, team sports, and the reason I'm asking this is my mother-in-law is very active at the age of late 60s. I'm not going to say exactly, I can't remember, so she'll tell me off. And she's often gets frustrated, if I'm honest, about the exercise opportunities that are there. And she's joined netball, but it's always in at risk of not running because not enough people sign up, or where they were is asking for more money. It's just so what are you seeing around England and or your local area in terms of team sports and getting older women active?
Well, I think it's growing. There's obviously still not enough places for women to come in, which is why this was the whole reason I set up Old Girls Play Twos, because if I'm an older woman and I want to go and get active somewhere, where do I go? Where do I go to look to see what's available for me? So we wanted to set the website up so we have the national governing bodies on there and what offers they're delivering for older women. So we're just building that up at the moment. And then what I want to do is run like some old girls play and stay clubs, which is basically will just be for any sport. And it's just going to be a 2-hour session where you just come and play for fun and then have a cup of coffee afterwards. It's that simple. But we need to start doing that more around the country so that women know that there is a place for them to go, and just give them some more information. And not just that, is to give them scientific evidence of what they're actually doing is good for them. There was a professor, I always talk about Professor Peter Krustrup. He's a professor at the Southern Denmark University, and he, I don't know if you watched, there was a program called Super Ages, and there was about a 5-minute piece in that where he did some research on a woman who's the same age as me. She was playing recreational football for 9 years, and the research that he did which was proper scientific research, was that having played football for 9 years, this woman had reduced her osteoporosis level from a red to an amber. So it's information like that I shout about all the time because I've never heard that before, and it's scientific evidence. So getting like a little worksheet that we can give out to women as well, so they know that there is evidence that they
and Jenny, when you were talking about your mother-in-law, I was coming back to my mother actually, and again it goes back to when you talk about the missed generation, regardless of which decade that exactly was. My mother's generation, even my generation, we weren't really told that resistance training was a thing at all. And for the elderly, if you have got some kind of muscle, those falls that you'll be having later on, you'll be able to absolutely support yourself much better than if you don't have that muscle. And we know that that deteriorates, right, with every decade after 30, that it's just disappearing anyway. And thinking of my mum again, she would love to do that. She would love to pick the weights up. And yet she has, like you rightly said, no idea where to begin. And that is where then injury can happen. So that support is vital.
Yeah, I think I've never felt as strong in my whole life, and I'm nearly 60. So the benefits of, going to the gym and playing football, and I'm just an ordinary person. I'm not athletic looking or anything like that, but I just do it for the fun and enjoyment, and I've never felt better or stronger.
And really good for brain health too, right?
Yeah.
Amazing. Kerry, I'd love to turn to you now. The World Health Organization's global report on ageism highlights the importance of intergenerational connections, and that's a lot about what you do. From your perspective, how does intergenerational practice, which in this sense is a structured approach where people of different ages are intentionally brought together, how does it help reduce ageist attitudes in both younger and older people?
Thank you. I'd love to answer this question, but first, can I just say what Carol is doing is really inspiring. I think it's amazing. It's a little bit different, but I took up roller derby at age 30.
What?
I'd never roller skated before, so I couldn't even stand up on skates. I apparently looked like Bambi on the ice. But I managed to learn how to skate and not really compete, but join in with the bouts. It was amazing. And I think what I'd love to highlight with the sports and joining in with that, the people that do the sports well, they love it, and it's their passion, and they love it when people come in and want to join in too. So if you are feeling a bit anxious about it, please know that anyone that loves that sport would love to help support you to join in too. So I just wanted to reinforce that, because I think it's a really important part. I also play water polo, and I just text my group and I was like, how old is our oldest and youngest player? So we've got a 22-year-old and a 50-year-old on our team. So it's very social, so very strong advocate for what Carol's doing, and sport in general. I think it's amazing. But yes, in my other world, I work in intergenerational programs. I had to write some notes down because it's such a huge question and I wanted to do it justice. So I'm going to refer to my notes if that's okay. So when we look at the World Health Organization's global report on ageism, one of the key messages is that ageism isn't just about older people, which is what you were highlighting in the introduction. It's how we think, feel, and behave across our whole lifespan. So from my perspective, working as an aged care physio and also facilitating intergenerational programs, I genuinely believe that intergenerational practice is one of the most practical and hopeful ways we can reduce ageist attitudes in both older and younger people. So as Penny highlighted, ageism can be seen in three ways: how we think, through stereotypes; how we feel, through biases or prejudices; and how we act, through discrimination. So I find that framework really helpful, because intergenerational connection actually addresses all three of those: the think, the feel, and the act. So let's start with how we think. Ageism often starts really early. Children pick up really subtle messages, such as older people slow down, they stop working, they need more help than offer help. Age Without Limits in the UK is currently has a campaign running to challenge ageism. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but there's a child's thought around an ageist comment. It says, why do we tell older people that they should slow down? Will their batteries run out? So this shows that ageism is actually really confusing for children. And even phrases that sound kind, like you look great for your age, it actually reinforces the idea that aging is somehow a problem to overcome. So we need to remember that we are all aging, from the moment we take our first breath until our last. Aging isn't something that suddenly starts at 65 or 75, it's lifelong. So when we separate aging from the rest of life, we unintentionally create this sense of otherness. They're aging, not us. However, when children spend meaningful time with older adults, so not just waving hello, actually genuinely engaging with them, these stereotypes often soften. Children don't see old, they see someone who can teach them something, laugh with them, solve problems with them, share stories. A relationship can develop, and relationships are much harder to stereotype. And then there's how we feel. So ageism is emotional. Like Penny said, it's often rooted in fear. Fear of decline, fear of irrelevance, fear of dependency. And over time, those messages from society can become internalized. So ageism then becomes self-directed, with older adults beginning to believe they're less capable or less valuable. The knock-on effect of this could be feelings of loneliness, which is a widespread health issue, which Carol talked about as well. So in Australia, we have something called the Council on the Aging, so COOTA, and in New South Wales, COOTA surveyed more than 2,200 people over 50 years of age and found that 60% of them reported feeling lonely. And among those who felt lonely, 60% also felt undervalued by society. So this shows to me that connection is really important, and loneliness isn't just about being alone, it's about feeling that you no longer matter. So intergenerational practice can help to restore that sense of purpose. When an older person is invited into a space, not as a reciprocant of care, but as a contributor, sharing a skill, offering insight, being listened to, we find that something shifts. Their identity is reinforced, their value is visible. So within Australia, intergenerational programs are growing. The awareness was really highlighted with a TV show called Old People's Homes for 4-year-olds, which is available on Netflix. They also did another TV show called Old People's Homes for Teenagers, which is amazing, but I don't think is available on Netflix at the moment. But it's great that it's becoming more common in Australia, because the same Cooter study with the 2,200 people, they also found with the same group of adults, 90% of them said they'd like to join an intergenerational program, which is fantastic. For children, intergenerational programs create connection, and connection reduces fear. A walking frame, slower speech, wrinkles, all these things become normal parts of the human experience rather than something strange or uncomfortable for children. And then there's how we act. Ageism becomes visible when we exclude older people from opportunities, make assumptions about their ability, or design communities where generations barely interact. Intergenerational programs are intentional acts of inclusion. They create shared goals, shared laughter, shared challenges. They remind us that we don't live in age silos, we live in communities. From a physio perspective, I see how important this is. When someone has a sense of purpose and is socially connected, they're more motivated to move. They engage more in rehab, and they push a little bit harder in their exercises that I give them. So I find purpose influences participation, and participation supports longevity and healthy aging. And for younger people, the benefits are just as important. They develop empathy, they learn communication skills across different ages, they gain perspective, and they begin to understand that aging isn't a decline into irrelevance. Older people have so much to give, as Penny highlighted. They've got wisdom, skills, patience, kindness, and knowledge. Perhaps the most powerful thing about ageism is that if we are fortunate, we will all experience aging. So it's the one form of discrimination that potentially affects every single one of us. So when we reduce ageism, we're not doing that for them. We're shaping the world we want to grow old in. If ageism is rooted in how we think, feel, and act, then intergenerational practice can help reshape all three, simply by replacing distance and misunderstanding with connection. So aging isn't their issue, it's our shared future. And a final thought is that the communities we create today are the ones that we will be living in tomorrow.
Amazing. Kerry, could you give us some examples of intergenerational projects? I know that you lead some yourself. So could you give us some ideas so that communities might have, an idea of what they could potentially stand up or what we're talking about?
Of course. So there's lots of different projects out there. My company that I've co-founded, we focus on preschool age children in Australia, so age between 3 and 5 years old. They're at preschool, and we decided to invite people from the community, so older people from the community, to come into the preschool space. We did that because we feel that children feel safer in their space, and the older people in the community are normally the socially isolated and the lowly ones. We want them to have a sense of purpose to come to preschool. So the programs, ours go for at least 7 weeks, because we want to develop the rapport and the relationship over that period of time. So it's not just a tokenistic one visit, it's a relationship that flows on. And we've actually found with our programs that even though the parents are not at the preschool, the children will see we call them grandfriends. So they will see their grandfriends in the community, at the shops, at the post office, and will pull their parents across and say, look, this is my grandfriend, and it will flow into the community so nicely. That's the one we're doing. There's other models that children are driven or walked to aged care facilities or aged care retirement villages, and the programs run there. There's lots of programs running with teenagers at the moment as well. I just went to a conference in Sydney and there was a lady talking about how they're using VR headsets. So everybody watches a VR headset and watches the journey. So I think she said one of them was like whitewater rafting. So they all go on this journey together and then they do an activity. So they made boats to flow down a waterfall after they'd watched this whitewater rafting activity. They were all doing it together. There was a bit of a challenge, a bit of a race happening. Another lady said that she was using technology to build a story of this lady called Jenny. So she was bringing all her photos in, all her lived experience, all her videos, all her stories. And then the teenagers watched her story and then were able to talk to Jenny about it. And it was really great for empathy building. So intergenerational programs can happen in so many different ways and formats. Yeah, they are all beautiful, amazing, but yeah.
Yeah, I've read about initiatives where they've had an old people's home where they've also rented out rooms to the students who might be going to a local university. And I think in this one, so it was in Holland, but it was some of music students. And then, to pay for their rooms, they would then play their instruments and play music for the the people in the home. And it's just such a nice synergy that actually, why can't we make our communities interact better? And I do think, I don't know what you think, whether there's a fear there. I'm curious to know like what the uptake was with between the children and the older residents or the older people in your community. Was there a fear of getting involved, of being vulnerable, or how was the uptake?
I didn't come across any fear so much, but we did structure the program in a way that we invited the older people that wanted to participate into the preschool prior to when the children weren't there, so prior to the program starting, so they felt comfortable in the space as well. We talked to the children a lot about it before the program started. We took pictures of the grandfriends and asked them what their favorite thing to do was, or their favorite place. And we displayed these posters up in preschool before the program started, so the children were really familiar with the grandfriends before they came in to meet them. The grandfriends that did take part, some of them were grandparents, because that's how programs start. You start with whoever wants to join and then the word spreads from there. Some of them we actually used socially prescribing methods. So we had some GPs that prescribed a couple of their patients. So it was all people that wanted to take part in it at this stage. I would love to try and find a way to find the people that are more socially isolated and lonely, because I feel like they would be a harder target to find but would benefit the most. So that's something that I'm working on. And I think social prescribing in Australia is not as known as in the UK, but it's something that I would like to promote and link into the intergenerational program.
Do you think that schools can also get more involved in this? Because I'm sort of thinking this is also a nice thing for schools to be able to do partnerships so that their youth would go out into the community and have, or vice versa, and get that going.
Yes, yeah, definitely. At this conference I just was at in Sydney with the Australian Institute of Intergenerational Practice, there was a lady that was walking school children across to the local care home. It was actually a Greek-based community, so she had the children learn. The children didn't know Greek, but the older people were a Greek community, so the children learned, I think she said head, shoulders, knees and toes in Greek, and were singing it with the older people. So there's definitely a scope that school age can definitely join in as well. There was another instance where a school nurse was starting intergenerational programs across the nursing home. She was a school nurse, but her mum was in an aged care facility, so she was able to connect the two. And she said that working with the teenagers, one girl in particular was quite wary about it, especially as one of the residents had dementia and he had a bit of an outburst of behaviour, which I think was a bit confronting for the teenager. But they took her aside and explained a bit more about what dementia can look like, and it was not her fault. This is what can happen, helped her feel a bit better. And she kept coming to the programme, and now she's considering working in aged care, considering going into that workforce. So
it's lovely. And I kind of feel like we're not, as children, we're not really presented with actually what it means to be old and what challenges we might have to face so that we can have empathy and understanding for that. When we're talking about dementia or Alzheimer's or all these different things, I don't know if children have a great understanding of that, and whether that is something that's also missing, that we ought to be having those conversations.
Yeah, definitely. We have a couple of children at preschool that are neurodivergent, and then when the grandfriends that we have invited into preschool, they don't have any cognitive issues, but I do take my children to some of my physio sessions sometimes with people living with dementia. I do water-based sessions with a couple of clients. It sparks a lot of joy. It's a lot of freedom of movement. And my children jump in with me and do somersaults and flips and things. My partner comes, so he's watching the children and I'm working with the client. But that intergenerational connection in the pool is amazing. We haven't done it for a little while, and my 5-year-old was asking how my client was the other day. He still talks about the fact that my client is so joyful in the water. He'll jump up and jump under the water, and he's so playful. I think that really appealed to my child's nature. And having these conversations with him about the fact that he does have dementia, my client, and this makes his brain works a little bit differently to other people. I think it's really important because you will see it more. We're an aging society, so children will see older people and the conditions that can happen in age more frequently because we are an aging society.
Although we don't see the images online or in magazines or in the media that often, do we? Like when you see an older woman who's projected on the cover of some magazine, that's more of still the exception than the norm, which obviously filters out.
This is true. And sorry. I was just going to say that's why these kind of programs, these old people's homes for 4-year-olds and old people's homes for teenagers are so important, because it's putting the two age groups together, and it's showing how relationships can develop and rapport and what each age group is going through, especially with the teenagers. It was showing how hard it is to be as a teenager in this age and what it looks like to be an older person. There's a beautiful moment where one of the grandfriends, one of the participants, is she stands up and she talks about her partner has dementia, her husband, who is in an aged care facility, and it's really emotional. And the teenagers just react with such compassion and empathy. It's beautiful to watch. I can send the link so you can pop it in the show notes. Yeah.
Beautiful. And what we're valuing as a society, right? Like looking deeper than those aesthetics and the looks, and like what is of value. It's, manners and skills and all the other things that can be brought to the table. I want to ask Carol, just to you, because we're talking about intergenerational. Do you also play matches then with other generations? Is there synergy there?
Oh. 1 second.
So when we first started, obviously there weren't many older women playing. So as they came in, we were in our 40s and 50s. And as women's recreational grew, we were having women 20, 30 coming into the game as well. So what we're finding now is that when we do play, we're trying to keep up with youngsters, which is a challenge in itself. But it's great to see the younger women coming in as well. So in a way, sometimes we try and challenge ourselves that we can actually keep up with them, whether we can
just
or not,
having that contact as well with different generations in a different way.
And you're meeting women and girls that you've never met. You would never meet in your normal life.
Yeah, and it's that mixing of generations, and with that naturally comes ages. And Penny referenced at the top of the show about my love for conversing or engaging or connecting with an old. They don't have to be wise. I just love old people. I want many a story, and I do love a story, so I won't go on too long. But I do think there's also a need of I completely, Kerry, the work you're doing with the younger younger children and the older people, the benefits is incredible. But in my age now, I still want those connections. I want to learn. I lost my No, I lost my grandfathers when I was quite young. I miss when my grandmothers passed. I miss that presence in my life. I've always, as well adopted like work mums, and I've just valued that different generation, and I think it goes beyond the kind of activity you're doing, and it's just the shared experiences and personalities, and who we all are as humans, but where we're coming at in our life point. I think's really good, and I think we touched on something as well about reaching the challenge of reaching people who actually need it the most. And often with this amazing initiatives, categorizing us all are doing amazing initiatives, but it's often the people that kind of have wanted to do it or have got that bit of confidence around it, that the first to step forward, or and there's often a lot of people that are in the background who would benefit so much. And I think that goes across all ages, depending if you're getting involved in younger with younger children, or if working with younger children, or experiencing younger children, or the older generations. And I think for us as these kind of change makers, or implementing change and trying to make progress in certain areas, that's always going to be the challenge. And there's wonderful programs like the social prescription as well, but that also relies on people asking for help, going in that first place. So I think this is just a call to anyone listening or who knows anyone. There's so many initiatives out there, and that's what I love about what you're doing, Carol, with the Old Girls Play Too, is it's going to be that access point, as you start to grow it and reach out, that will be so valuable. And there are, there's a lot of stuff, AGK, I used to do the calling time volunteering. I actually ended up doing it. I only stopped when I moved to Poland, because I just thought maybe I just can't cope. But for 9 years, every week I'd ring an old lady and talk to her for half an hour. I didn't know her, anything about her really. Obviously I grew to know her very well. And there's lots of stuff, or even in your own, the work you're doing, Kerry, if you live near an old folks home, or you want to, I remember going once, then COVID hit, with my little boy, said, "Oh, would you like us to come in and do some nursery rhymes?" And they were like, maybe. there is stuff out there, but people need to know where to look, and that can be a challenge.
Actually, I think it makes a massive difference to go into it. We started a Cogs and Care Homes project, where we would take football into residential care homes with residents with dementia. And although it was funny to start with, because they just embraced it. But this is one example. There was one woman who was really angry. She had dementia. She was really angry, and every time we sort of had the foam football and we would throw it to her so she could catch it or kick it, she would really grumble and swear and everything. And then at Christmas we did like a circular thing where we just kicked the ball to every resident in the lounge, and they would kick it back. And this woman who was in a wheelchair, who was really angry, we put the football on her foot, and she actually moved her foot to kick the ball, and it just melted me, because I just thought it is actually making a difference, even though you don't see it. Just that little movement of her foot, and the rewards are just so so good for us to do.
And that involvement, that actual contact with the generations, breaks down those preconceptions. You've got the older generation sometimes who are dismissive of the youth, or think they don't know what they're doing, and don't want to be involved, and likewise. And when you bring it down to that human contact, and here I'm an individual person, what that can change and spark change. I wanted to ask both of you if you can remember when you first became aware of ageism. Carol, do you have any memories where you can think back? Oh yeah.
I think when you are a lot younger in your teen years, you just think old people are just there, and they're just old, and they're waiting to just sit in their chair. And your perception when you're younger of older people is totally different. Well, probably when I was younger is totally different to what it is now. But all the information that they have and all their experiences, I just think sometimes we forget that of the lives that they've lived, and that we should find out about those lives before it's too late, basically. And then I think just get active as well, because that will just elongate anybody's life. So I think back to being a young teenager, like you say, it's just when you're getting older, you just see people, this may sound really harsh, but you just see them as old people.
So far off, isn't it, as well, for yourself at that age?
I'm nearly 60 and I'm like, I actually don't feel old.
No.
And I don't want to be. And I had a letter through saying, oh, you're now 50 plus, so we can offer you seated exercise. And I'm like, what?
Don't want it.
My mother-in-law's great. Yeah.
So I think things are changing a bit, but they're still.
What is that seated exercise?
Well, you do like weights sitting down.
Yeah.
Opposite the government.
It was the local sports centre.
Yeah.
And you were like, no, love.
No, it's like went straight in the recycling.
Love it.
I think as well is, sorry, just to add on, is that people often think that they're old, you know, or they worry about aging so young. I've got some friends that I think since 30s has been worried about getting older.
That's me. That's me.
Well, now you're in that category. You know.
What about you, Kerry? Can you remember?
That's a hard question, because I've worked in aged care for so long, and I've when I was living in England as well, like I was around my grandparents as well a lot, and I don't know if I even really saw them as I knew they were old, but I don't know if I saw them as old, because I've always just really appreciated older people's stories and their wisdom and their knowledge and all of those things. And I think that's why I've ended up in aged care, because even though I'm a physio, a lot of what I do is the rapport building and the social connection, which is why I've ended up into intergenerational programs. The physio is still an important part, but the social side of it is as important, I would say. So yeah, I'm not sure if I can pinpoint an age, but interestingly, when I was in Sydney this weekend for the conference, I'm budgeting at the moment, so I decided to stay in a youth hostel, and it was an interesting concept, because I feel like maybe I experienced some ageism with that, because I shared it with an 18-year-old friend, and his comment was, "Are you allowed to? Like, are you allowed to stay in a youth hostel?" Which I thought was interesting.
Thanks a lot.
Yes. And then from the other end, from the colleagues that I was going to the conference, "Are you really?" Like it was kind of from both angles. So it was an interesting concept for me. Also went to the pub for dinner afterwards with everybody, walking up the stairs, and there's probably maybe around a 20-year-old who moved aside for me. Like it was the first time that I'd probably experienced the fact that I was the older person in the pub and the younger person was moving aside from me, and that felt quite strange for me. But it also it made me feel like the stigma that is attached to young people is not warranted, because everybody there was very polite and friendly and very respectful. So I think that needs to change as well, the stigma around young people at the moment.
That's a bit like though if someone gives up their seat for you in the bus or something. It's the question of whether you want to.
I know.
Oh my God.
So I think back to when I was younger as well, and when I was at school. So I left school in 1981. But when we were at school, my parents were in their 40s, and then we used to think, God, our parents are really old.
Ancient.
And now I think, oh my goodness, there's nowhere near any age, is it, when you're 40?
Yeah, I was really lucky that my grandfather, as you were saying, Kerry, like you had contact with your grandparents when you were growing up, as I did. And my grandfather at 90, he was still out in the garden, his huge garden, doing it all by himself, on his hands and knees, up the ladder in the fruit trees in the orchard, doing all of this stuff. So I always thought, my God, he's so much fitter than I will ever be. I didn't know how he had the power to stay out in the garden for those hours. And that really defied that other sort of stereotype, which is like, you know, you leave work at 60 and then you put your slippers on and you sit in front of the fire and that's it, curtains closed, right? So I think
that's what we're seeing in our intergenerational programs as well. Like one of our grand friends, I think he's 87. he's nearly 90, and he comes in and he does clay work. He was an artist, so he comes in and does clay work with the children, and we sit and have morning tea first as a nice meeting point when they first come in. And one of the children was saying how old he was. So this grandfriend said, "Can you guess how old I am?" And when he said 87, this child was like, "Wow, that's so old." But I think before he'd said that, he hadn't even, the thought had not occurred to this child that this grandfriend was old, because he comes in and he does clay and he, joins in with them, and it just didn't occur to the child. So yeah, I think these programs are really important to break down this ageism culture that seems to be in our society.
Agreed. Right, now we have time for our tween question today, and that is, what do you remember about being a tween, and was it hard? Carol, do you remember being a tween? Or was a tween even a thing?
I don't think tween was even a word when I was a tween, but I think it's just trying to find your place when you're a teenager. There's all sorts of things going on with hormones, and it's just trying to find where you belong in life, I think. And sometimes I think it's really difficult. I was a very, very shy child. I wouldn't have said boo to a goose. And when I look back now and think I can actually speak in front of people now without worrying about what I'm saying. But I think that is down to just getting active and building your confidence up. Yeah, I think it is difficult being a teenager, because you're trying to sort of find your right friends, you're trying to find, where you're going. So yeah, it's it's one of those difficult parts of life, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And my daughter's always complaining being a tween, because she's 11 now, and she's always saying that, they always get lumped in. So when we're talking about the tweens, we're always talking about the sort of 9 to 13 age group, and she's always saying she's getting lumped in with her 7-year-old brother, and that's not fair, because they're different and they're a different level, and they shouldn't have to watch the same TV programs, they shouldn't have to have the same computer games, all this stuff. And yet there is a recognition for those teenagers, so 13 plus, but often those sort of, and I think as well, we're growing up quicker, we're confronted with so much stuff at an earlier age that's potentially more adult content, that they do feel a lot, I do think they feel there's an ageism thing going on there, that somehow they're not being recognized and seen for who they are. Kerry, what would you say? Do you remember being a tween?
I do remember being a tween. I don't think it was called that when I was a tween either. I remember, like Carol said, trying to find friendship groups, trying to find my place, trying to find a purpose. Even when you're a tween, you're still trying to, like, why am I here? What do I like? What don't I like? I think I remember breaking out of the mold a little bit, and I joined the Air Cadets, because I wasn't keen on what a lot of the tween friends were doing, and that looked like a bit of an adventure. So it was the best thing for me. I absolutely loved it. There was only boys in the Air Cadets. I managed to convince 2 of the girls to join with me to try and even out the numbers a bit. It was quite hard, because it was not a normal thing to do, and the uniform kind of sucked a little bit. But if you can get past those hard moments, you can get really good moments. So I would encourage you to try and do new things, even if they feel a bit scary, because you never know what you might get out of that.
And I remember, like, clothes was a huge issue at that age, because, you're sort of 11, 12, you're wanting to dress grown up, and yet nothing fits. And so it's really hard. That was where Topshop then came in, didn't it? They started to sort of try and address that. Yeah, Topshop. And started to try and address that middle gap where it's like, this you can actually wear, and it's not the plaid trousers that your mum picked out for you when you were 8, So,
yes.
Okay, well, thank you so much. A huge thanks to our guests today, Kerry and Carol, for sharing their experiences and their wisdom with us. And to everyone listening, remember, every interaction across generation matters. Small acts of curiosity, kindness, and respect can challenge ageist assumptions and help build stronger, more connected communities. This week, why not try reaching out to someone from a different generation? You might be surprised at what you learn, and how connecting with someone from another generation might challenge your own assumptions and stereotypes. If today's episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who might appreciate it and leave us a review. We're Penny and Jenny, and this has been Perspectives from the Informed Perspective. Keep noticing, keep connecting, and keep shaping a world where every age is valued. Until the next time, stay thoughtful, stay inspired, and keep informing those perspectives.